Between 1919 and 1923, Japan built another class of second-rate destroyers. 28 were originally planned, but due to Japan's ever-present industrial and economic limitations, only 21 were built. 8 were funded in 1918, 5 in 1919, and 8 in 1920. These were the 850-ton Momi class. In broad terms, they were of similar size to the earlier Momos. There were, however, several changes. Most notably, like many smaller German ships of the time, they had a forecastle deck that ended well forward of the superstructure. This allowed a bank of torpedoes to be fitted forward of the bridge on the main deck and still be relatively dry. Another change was the torpedoes themselves grew from 450 mm 18-inch to 533 mm 21-inch, though the number carried shrank because each mount lost a tube. Almost dumbfoundingly, despite most being completed after World War I and despite the Anglo-Japanese alliance, they were completed with no depth charges. Instead, they carried 20 mines and sweeping gear. For industrial limitation reasons, this class used several different types of turbines. Probably the most important change, though, was the switch over to oil burning rather than coal-fired. With newer and better destroyers available, most lost their names and were converted to patrol boats in 1939, with a few hulked or converted to tenders or depot ships. Including the 3 that remained destroyers, all the patrol boats served in decisively secondary roles, mostly patrolling the South and East China Seas to Japan route during the war. Momi was started January 21, 1918, and completed December 27, 1918. Taki was started December 2, 1918, and completed December 25, 1919. Kaya was also started December 23, 1918, and completed March 28, 1920. Nashi was started February 2, 1919, and completed December 10, 1919. Kaki was started February 27, 1919, and completed August 2, 1920. Tsuga was started March 5, 1919, and completed June 20, 1920. Niri was started September 5, 1919, and completed March 31, 1920. Kuri was started December 5, 1919, and completed April 30, 1920. Fuji was started December 6, 1919, and completed May 31, 1921. Kiku was started January 20, 1920, and was completed December 10, 1920. Hagi was started February 28, 1920, and completed April 20, 1921. Aoi was started April 1, 1920, and was also completed December 10, 1920. Suzuki was started May 3, 1920, and completed May 25, 1921. Warabi was started October 12, 1920, and completed December 19, 1921. Tsuta was started October 16, 1920, and was completed June 30, 1921. Asashi was started November 15, 1920, and was completed October 29, 1921. Hisi was started November 10, 1920, and completed March 23, 1922. Sumiri was started November 24, 1920, and completed March 31, 1923. Tada was started December 20, 1920, and was completed July 31, 1922. Yomogi was started February 26, 1921, and was completed August 19, 1922. Hasu was started March 2, 1921, and was completed July 31, 1922. Main armament was again 3 120mm 45 caliber low-angle guns in single open mounts. Again, one at the bow, one midship between the funnels, and one at the stern. Torpedo armament was 2 twin 533mm banks, one between the forecastle and bridge. The second was aft between the rear funnel and the after gun. Showing their British influence, at the stern was tracks for laying 20 mines plus minesweeping gear. Propulsion was provided by 3 oil-fired boilers, 2 in the forward room, 1 in the rear, venting to 2 funnels. These provided steam to 2 turbines that produced 21,500 horsepower. Each drove one of the 2 propellers for a top speed of 36 knots. They had 1 rudder. Modernizations. Between 1939 and 1940, Kiku, Aoi, Hagi, Suzuki, Tsuta, Fuji, Hishi, Yomogi, and Tadi were converted, reclassified, and renamed as patrol boats 31 through 39 respectively, essentially coastal convoy escorts. Their rear boiler was removed to allow for more fuel storage, which lowered their speed to 18 knots. The midship 120mm gun, both torpedo banks, and the mine-laying and sweeping gear was removed. In return, sonar was fitted, the 2 depth charges racks at the stern and 4 depth charge throwers were added for 60 depth charges, along with ballast to improve stability. Displacement rose to 935 tons. Also in 1940, Niri, Taki, Kaki, Ashi, and Sumiri were converted to depot and training ships. The rear boiler was removed, dropping their speed to 14 knots. The midship and rear 120mm guns were removed, as were the rear torpedo tubes. Displacement fell to 720 tons. In mid-1941, PB 34, 35, 36, 38, and 39 were converted to fast transports in preparation for the coming war. The rear 120mm gun was moved to where the midship one had been between the funnels. Depth charge storage was reduced to 18. The rear funnel was removed and the stern was cut down to carry and launch a Daihatsu landing craft. Accommodations for 150 troops were also added. In early 1942, the 3 that were still destroyers, Tsuga, Kuri, and Hasu, replaced their midship 120mm gun with more medium anti-aircraft and traded their mine-laying and sweeping gear for 36 depth charges and sonar. Due to age, their speed was no better than 21 knots. Warabi collided with the light cruiser Jinsu on August 25, 1927, and sunk. Momi, Kaya, and Nashi were decommissioned before the war. During the second invasion of Wake on December 23, 1941, PB 32 and 33 were heavily damaged by shore fire, grounded, and written off. PB 37 was heavily damaged January 24, 1942 off Balikpapan by the American destroyers Pope and Parrot. Run aground, she was salvaged but never repaired. Post-war, her hulk was scrapped. PB-39 was sunk April 23, 1943 by the submarine Seawolf off Yonaguni. PB-35 was sunk September 2, 1943 by Army aircraft off Leh. PB-31 was sunk off Palau March 30, 1944 by carrier aircraft. PB-34 was heavily damaged when she collided with the former destroyer turned target ship Yakazi March 6, 1943 near Cavane, and was later sunk at Truk by carrier aircraft July 3, 1944. PB-38 was sunk in the Bashi Strait November 5, 1944 by the sub Atula. Tsuga was escorted the tankers at the Battle of the Philippine Sea and was sunk by carrier aircraft at Macau January 15, 1945. PB-36 was damaged beyond repair at Surabaya by American and British carrier aircraft May 17, 1945. She was surrendered to the Dutch post-war and scrapped. Ashi was converted into a Shinyo suicide motorboat mothership in mid-1945. She was scrapped in 1947. Curry survived the war, but on October 8, 1945, off Pusan, she hit a mine and sunk. Hasu was scuttled as a breakwater off Fukui in 1946. Miri, Kaki, and Sumiri were scrapped in 1948, while Taki was sunk as a breakwater off Akita that same year.